Okay, so for today's tutorial, I want to show you a little bit about Photoshop and the tools that we can use to take various images, particularly these backgrounds, and then other images that were shot in different places. Color match those, knock out the backgrounds, and composite them together in order to create sort of a new image composition. So you can tell like all of these images have various color grading setups. This was just a straight photo shot during the day, probably noonish. These are obviously generated. What I've done is I've gone and actually gotten these images. They're all Creative Commons, free to modify. And I'll put links to the sources to give the authors credit in the video. What I want to do though is I want to show you a couple of tools in Photoshop that are useful and processes that are useful for finding your way around Photoshop, particularly how to use layers and layer effects to get image color to match. So the first thing we want to do though is try to knock out one of these backgrounds. I'm trying to figure out which image I want to use. This one's kind of at an angle and leaning forward, plus it's shot down, whereas this one's more straight. I think it'll match what'll work here. So, plus the lighting's the same too. Of course, we could flip this. I may actually do both, but first I want to just show you. So we'll duplicate the layer, just grab the layer, drag it down to this new layer, and then turn off this background. And then in order to separate out the background here, there's a couple of different options we can use. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's crop it. I'm just going to take this and crop this image, and I might keep the flag. Yeah, let's keep the flag. Image, crop. Now, if I zoom in, and I'm at 100% there, and here I'm at 33%, and we'll see what that does. Let me just copy and paste the whole thing and see how big it is. Paste it in. So, yeah, it's pretty good, actually. Might work. We can even keep the shadow. Or we could scale them bigger. Generally, you don't want to do too much scaling if you can avoid it. Although, in this case, it may work out. We'll see how it works. This guy could work better, although just the angle in the image isn't quite right. Like I said, we may try both. So what we want to do is we want to knock out this background, and actually the background around the flag as well. So in order to do that, you could just mass select, or even do like the magic wand. Like if we take this magnetic lasso and just draw it around. Oops, I was selected already. Draw it around close to him, then you get this sort of selection. It's really awkward. Better way to do it is with the magic eraser. So if you do the eraser tool, then you've got this background eraser tool and a magic eraser tool. Let's do the background eraser tool first. And the gist is that where you start selecting, it will find the edge. Notice that it tried to erase everything up to a certain point, and that's just up here in the tolerance. So if we take the tolerance down, and the other setting that you can set on this is limits. So discontiguous, contiguous, and find edges. Let's go with find edges for now. So now it's tolerance is too low. And then you start to see where we can run up against the edge and erase. And it does a pretty good job of erasing around this. It's probably, I need to crank the tolerance up another notch. But I want to double check. I'm also going to put, just to make it easier to see what's going on, I'm going to put black in the background behind him. So I just made this black layer over here. Now, you can see what you're actually erasing and where you're ending up with it. So let's do, let's do contiguous, discontiguous. Discontiguous, I believe, will go across holes. So like, in other words, if I start here, notice that it works in this gap where normally it would have trouble finding the edge. Actually, that's a good place to try to start to get the settings pretty good. You can see where I erased into the leg a little bit, and I'm also erasing into the flag. So probably I may have to do it in chunks. Just trying to get it. Let's try also to the magic eraser. Let's see what happens. So that just sort of does like a selection where it finds the edges as you drag. But notice that it has trouble here in the white. That's not too bad. So they have different, this is sort of like the magic lasso tool where you can see where you can mess up. So I like the feedback of the, instead of using the magic eraser, using this background eraser tool. So let me go back. Now, oops, lost my layer. So black. I'm doing Alt Delete to fill that with black. And 14, discontiguous. You can see where it's having trouble. So you have to be careful. This is a kind of noisy image and not super high res either. So let's make our brush a little bit smaller. You can see where I'm erasing a little bit in there. So I'm going to do it in chunks, really lower the sensitivity and the size. So I don't go too far into the edge. So this is one way you can knock out the background. You can see where it has issues. This particular image is going to have issues just because of the noise and the contrast, to the point where you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with it. You may have to just manually edit by just doing a straight eraser. Like that. But I'm going to show you the best way I've found, period, without having to use all this magic. The magic eraser will work well on like black backgrounds that were shot maybe against a green screen or blue sky or a blurry background where there's a lot of contrast between the image that you want to separate from the background and the actual background. But in this case, because it's so light and the colors are so similar, he's just white, it's going to be difficult to get this to select. That said, we can use channels and create our own mask. So if you go to channels, and the difference between layers, for those that don't know, is layers are just individual RGB images. Channels are the actual red, green, and blue channels of each particular layer. So when you're on a layer and you go to channels, you see the composite RGB, the red, the green, and the blue. And what we're looking at these for is we want to pick the one that seems to have the most contrast of these grayscale images between the background and the edge of the astronaut. So red is okay. Does actually really well here and here. Green is a little more neutral, but still does okay. Look, if you watch this section right here, between the red and the green, They're about the same. In blue, and because this is white, it's going to be relatively the same. You can see where the flag may do better. It's definitely not red. You don't want to use red. The blue is probably the best for the flag. So, because they're about the same otherwise, I'm going to use the blue so I get the flag as well. So basically we'll just duplicate that layer here. And then what we want to do is Control L. This will bring up our levels adjustment. And you want to try to create enough darkness to separate or start to fill in the edges. It's just not going to work that well, the gray. Basically, I'm trying to create more contrast between the background and him. Instead, I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to use what's called the dodge and burn. So dodge will, dodge will lighten the image a lot as you brush across it, and burn will darken the image. But right now, depends on what your range of settings is for. So in this case, this is light, so I'm going to want to dodge the midtones because the inside of the his inside is darker than or lighter than the background, so I'm going to use the midtones or even the shadows. And let's see, I'm trying to basically create a color difference between the two. Black and white's what I'm heading to. So in his case, I think because he's mostly dark anyway, I'm going to want him to go light and the background to go dark. So what I can do is dodge, and we'll dodge the midtones. Notice that starts to make his, you can see where I'm also doing it in the inside here. So what we can do is we look for color differences and just try to separate them more. Let's try burn, highlights, or not highlights, let's try shadows. The reason I'm choosing shadows here is because I want to set exposure to 10 or 100%, because I want to be able to brush across this outside edge without affecting the inner part of his outfit too much. So you can see where I can kind of safely brush over this edge and not affect his suit too much. It just kind of bumps up against it. I can definitely, well, because his arm's darker here, I have to do kind of an inverse. But this is the hard part right here in terms of separating the two. You can even just like hold up against it and like tap, and it'll just find the edge and create an outline. A little bit. There's a little noise. Like I said, there's relatively low resolution image because he's so far into the background. I got to be careful here because I don't want to. So what I can do to fix some of these issues that I'm seeing in terms of where the shadows and the lights are mixing is go in and just paint white with a small, probably relatively hard brush. Smaller, like that. Yeah. Zoom in. And actually go even smaller with the brush. something like that. I'm just holding down Shift to draw straight lines in small bits. Can't really tell. Let me look at the zoom out. Trying to understand what this is. This looks like it's still part of the background, and this is just a flap or something hanging loose. So, oops, don't want to zoom in to the point where I can see. That's all internal. Okay, so we can finish this out by just painting with a bigger brush. Look at that. All right. Zoom in and do a smaller brush just to finish this part. Now, he's all dark. We can quickly paint by black. I'm going to leave the flag out of this too. So if we go back to our dodge and burn tool, we want to basically dodge all of this using midtones set to 100% and just do it until it's white. We might even try doing shadows instead and see if that goes quick. Nope, shadows is we would dodge him by notice that by selecting midtones, we're not biting into what we've already painted now. Let me make it solid. There we go. Seems like my brush has some transparency on it. That, because the exposure's set, midtones, hardness, size, yep. Could be, I don't know. It's like, notice that it's, but, you know, I can go, now that I've got this, and in this selection mask, I can go really big, just like in the magic eraser tool, and white out the whole background. I got a little work to fix there, where it was wasn't quite black, but you can see where I wasn't painting completely black inside either, but that's okay. I can fix those holes. Alright, then let's come back with paintbrush and black. Notice that as I've done this, I've also created this kind of edge that's super sharp and kind of pixelated. I can clean that up with a little slight blur. Okay. And from there, we can just like fill white. Oops, black. So you can kind of see where some of this that looks like it's white actually isn't once you fill up with it, because this is kind of still a little gray. But we can fix that by selecting our dodge tool some more, and instead of going with midtones now, do highlights. I've got a selection here, is why it's not painting. There's a little, so I just click. It's midtones, highlights. So the highlights now will only attack the kind of lighter grays and leave the gray, darker grays, midtones intact. Okay, so there's our selection mask. If we control click that, now we get a selection of the background, and we can select this and delete, and we have our mask. And you can see where, because we've got this black in the background, you can see where certain things didn't select, and it's a little rough on the edges. That's just because I was so aggressive in trying to get it done for the tutorial. But the I don't know if you can see this in the video, but there's a little edge here. You can basically just select with a magic wand. Let's do like 10 on the tolerance. You can see where it selects it. We can delete that. Same thing here, there. Here for the ground, probably actually set it back to 32. Part of that was where the selection mask, it looks white, but it's just not quite white. There's some gray in here. So what we can do is if we select everything, Control L, you'll see where there's some, the white isn't a straight line like the black. Basically just pull this to the inside and that'll lighten everything in there. Like that. Now if we do that selection, we should get a clear, go back and delete. And we don't have any outline now. Alright, so yes, he's rough on the edges. What we can do, we could blend it here, or we can go and select, instead of this smudge, this blur tool, and just run that along the edge, but set it so that it's smaller. Try to blend it that way, and also set the strength way down too, so you can get kind of a sharp, get your edge back. But I'm going to leave it like that for now, because we don't know how big he's going to be in the final image, and we can do all that. We can do the same thing I was just talking about doing later on. So let's copy him now, his layer. I just hit Control C, And now we're going to go into, we'll go into this one. Paste them in there. All right, so now that I've put them in the picture, what's wrong is the color's not the same. This picture's got kind of a reddish tone, and he was shot with sort of a bluish earth reflection, kind of white balance, perfect white balance. So if we want to see how do we color correct that, we could just sort of like play around with color, go under image and, layer, and do an adjustment layer on them, or we could do color overlay. We can do image and then adjustments, and we could play around with like the color balance, where we go and we pull this up and we start pulling these around and try to get like kind of a reddish orange tint. But then we have to guess, and we're not going to get a perfect match. There is a way to get a really quick perfect match, and that is if we go and we create a new layer on top of both of these, and then go image, or layer, and or edit fill, fill, which is Shift F5. But I wanted to show you where it was at, so it's fill or Shift F5. I'll do the Shift F5. That'll bring up this fill option, and we want to fill it with 50% gray. And we get that. So it's kind of like, so what? But if we set that with 50% gray, and then we set its overlay effect, which is all of this, all the way down to luminosity, we get this mask. Now, doesn't look like much. If we make using the create a new fill adjustment layer option down here in the layers, or we can go up here under layer and create a new fill or an adjustment layer, and what we want to do is a hue and saturation. It's fine. Basically then just crank up the saturation. We get this for the image. Now this allows us to see how we want to match his color to this background and make him blend, basically give him a color tone. I'll show you some other examples in this video, but this gives you the idea. Now if we select his layer again and we add a selective color adjustment layer right above, we can select this and start playing around with the settings to get it to blend to this background. The problem is if we do it right now, it's going to do the background as well because it's not clipped to just work on this layer. So I'll just give you an example of that, where if we change, you notice you see the background changing too. Let me undo that. Instead, we just select this layer, pull down under the menu option, this little multi-horizontal line thing here, and we want to create a clipping mask. Notice that it created a little arrow that points down to this layer now. So now if we do any adjustments, it'll only work on him and won't affect the background. The other thing that we want to do is, instead of working with colors, we want to make sure we work with whites, neutrals, and blacks. So let's take a look at whites and start adjusting. So this is going to be our highlights, and the highlights that are in the background are basically yellow. So what we want to do is try to make these go to more yellow, like that. Then if we go to neutrals, the neutrals are more orange and red. So we can try to make those blend. And then the darks or blacks are going to be more kind of reddish. Basically, when you start to get this guy and he looks like he's completely blending with what you've got going on in the background, and he starts to. Let me zoom in on this. You can't really find the edge, and the shadows and the darks and stuff start to look about the same as what you're seeing in the image. So in other words, this red is a good shadow. So I'm set on blacks here, so I want to kind of introduce more red into the shadows to match this. Maybe a little more yellow for the orange, and then figure out the cyan. Something like that, I think. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So now, how do I, now to see the overall effect of the blend, all we have to do is just turn off these two layers. So now, this is him blended with the image that we just set him on. That's what he was before from the moon. So you can see where he kind of took on some of this brownish saturation. Now, in effect, this whole thing could probably use a little more pop. So I could put a layer now on top of this, set it to red to try to make it look more kind of Martian. Something like that, I think. Put that whole thing and then Alt-Delete to fill it. And now if we select just some overlay, trick will be what color to fill it with. Soft light, maybe. Overlay's too strong. Thinking we're going to change the effect after we get done with it as well, but let's try soft light, and we will make it transparent. So there's that. Maybe we duplicate that and do an overlay and make that more transparent. Let's turn this back on and see. So you can see where we lost some of the contrast in him because he's not matching, the shadows aren't matching the rocks here. So we can go and do a little more tweak now that we have this to get the detail and try to fix that. So we're playing with the blacks, maybe the midtones. Got too light. Let's try the blacks. Put a little black in there. It's starting to match pretty good. Let's make sure the yellow and the oranges match. So there's a little green in the sun. That looks pretty good. Let's go to whites. Whoops, accidentally went to yellows. Let me turn that back off. 0. Make sure I didn't do that on the red too. Okay, go to whites, and so pulling it to the right on the cyan helps with the yellow a little. Going a little bit towards magenta and or yellow. Let's turn it off and see what that looks like. Matches pretty good on the edge there. This isn't matching at all, but we can fix that later. Probably need to add a shadow. Zoom out. I'm thinking too that overall his contrast is too sharp. We need to modify him just a little bit to muddy him up a little. So we'll take that, do a levels, and just change the output level just a little bit. Preview versus, yeah, that helps a lot. He was just too white before. Something like that. Okay. Let's zoom in and see what a shadow can look like. So right now, this is very sharp, and you can tell that a lot of stuff that's going on here is kind of blurry. So maybe, in order to make him blend a little bit better, we can make the whole thing just a little bit blurrier. Filter, let's try a regular blur. Not enough. Filter, blur more. That's pretty good. Starting to get there. All right, so now let's think about this. We also probably want to introduce some of this noise that you see kind of around, because like right now he's clean and the background's kind of noisy, and even though you don't really see that in the detail, it'll help. So we can just make a new layer. Oops, not there though. Make a new layer here. Pull it down below, and we're going to add just a black and white noise right here. Add noise. We got to make it white, so we're going to fill it with white. Add that noise. Okay, so this is where we're going to want to see what the noise looks like. So we're going to do a composite. So we're going to make it so that it's going to be multiply. So that'll make the white disappear, and then the noise that we add in will end up becoming something that matches this. So filter, noise. Yeah. So Gaussian. Trying to figure out how much to add. Let's try that. It's too small. Although maybe it's, we make it and then scale it up. Let's see, add noise, a little bit more. All right, so now we've applied noise to everything. We don't want to like make the whole image more noise, unless we're doing like a dust storm or something. So what we need to do is mask out this noise. So we just control click on him, select inverse, and then on our noise, if we add a clipping mask, no, not a clipping mask, add a layer mask, reveal all, and then just delete to mask out everything but him, which really is just masking out everything but the noise that's over him. And then perhaps if we select this and do a slight blur, or blur more on the noise, you can see where it starts to sort of blend them in a little bit. And this is without and with. Now the noise could actually be scaled a lot. So edit, hold on, zoom out so we can see the edges. Edit and scale, transform scale. This shouldn't scale the mask, but it should scale Actually, it did scale the mask. So we'll add this mask. I'm going to delete it. Don't apply. We'll add the mask after we scale the noise. I wanted to get it to blend better. So edit, transform, scale. Zoom in and see. I'm just trying to get a feel for if the noise matches what's going on here. There may even be a photo noise filter. And you can see what the noise effect has. Yeah, that's starting to look a little bit more like it. Enter and see. It's pretty good. Now if we add the mask, control, layer mask, reveal selection, or yeah. Then our noise is back to being just applied to him. Yeah, that helps a lot. Okay, so now we've got him composited in there. What if we wanted to add something like this into the picture? So we do the same process, basically duplicate, hide this. This is one where we may actually be able to select using the eraser. I'm just deleting black behind it so we can see what happens when I knock it out. So if we use our eraser tool, background eraser, change the size. And it's discontiguous and the tolerance is probably not enough. Yeah, that works pretty good. Actually, I like this in the background too. Excuse me. So I'm just erasing over everything as much as I can to get rid of all of the stuff. We'll get the blue, more of the blue in a second. Then we'll do the same thing. And the way this tool works is basically just wherever you select. If I select here, it's going to erase until it gets to an edge. So if I select the blue, that becomes the sample. And then it goes and erases that blue as long as I hold down and drag. Same thing with this gray. I'm going to have to do some magic here in a sec. Now this white. Oops, see where I started to okay. Leave that for now. Could probably just using this to create as much of an outline as I can. Tolerance could probably go up a little. Yeah, it's working good. see the JPEGing artifacts here. I'm going to try to just avoid. So I'm basically erasing out the track here now. Oops, it's too close. Getting rid of some of these rocks. Yeah, the tolerance is too high. Same thing. I'm going to have to do a straight edge on that anyway. Let's crank the tolerance back up. All right, so get rid of some of that. Maybe this green, yeah, that got good. All right, and the blue. Red. All right, so now what we can do is we can basically just click on this whole thing and turn it into a mask and make a channel. Watch what happens. And then delete white, and you'll see where we've kind of got the reverse of what we had before. Actually, before we do that, let me go and fix this track real quick. So I just want to erase. Just because this was so solid, I'm getting rid of it, so then we can, I just want to show the idea for being able to do this selection mask. Just kind of manually, real slow going to clean up this edge. Doesn't matter that much, but all right. Get rid of these. All right, so now if we do control click that layer, go to our channel, alt, delete white, and all I'm doing is deleting white because the white is the foreground layer here, so that's why I clicked the alt. Now if we select everything, we have the beginning of our mask, so I can use the dodge and burn. Not dodge in this case, I want to burn. And I want to burn the shadows at 100%. And just run this along the outer edge. Notice I'm not being very careful. But that will make everything go black so that I get my edge masked without having to take too much work. Same thing here. These rocks I'll probably delete in a sec. Now, we probably could have done some work with the windows on this image. Like I could have gone and done the mask in there because you can see where they're going to blue. Right here. Probably it's not a bad idea. Let me do that. Let's delete this alpha here. We're going to do it again. Go back to our layer and we'll do the magic eraser, background eraser, I mean. Make it a little bit smaller. Tolerance looks okay. Nope. This is where it's so close in terms of the color that it's going to be hard to get it to do its magic, because it's going to want to bleed. See what I mean? It's like the JPEGing. So maybe in this case, maybe better to, nope, not select. You may have to just manually do it. Or use a gradient tone. Yeah, because there's a difference in lightness here, we can probably use another mask to create these selections. So let's go ahead and just do this. Make a new layer. I'm just zooming out. Alt delete. There's that. Now let me look at one of these and find the one that gives me the best contrast. I think it's going to be the blue. Actually, let me look closer. What I'm looking for is the difference in these windows. Which isn't much. Probably the blue. The green's going to have more pixel information than the red or the blue because of the way cameras work. Red might be the one, or green, I mean. So let's duplicate that. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and just paint white on these. So let me just go ahead and draw. Notice it can't find the edge there. That's all right. We will manually paint it. So the reason I'm painting white is because I'm going to basically darken everything out on this particular mask and just select the windows. So paintbrush, white, pretty small. 12 into, yeah. I'll fix the corner, the edges on this. I'm just going for a rough mask for now. Let's go smaller. Zoom in. Four's too big. Let's just go 1. And this one. Probably, yeah, straighten out the top. Then this edge. So let's see what else we need to. I think these. by making this edge, we should be able to then select that and just delete. Same thing there, just to brighten it up a little bit. See, if we do that, it won't work, but when you make that first edge with the paintbrush, it gives it something to stop against. I'm just holding down Shift and just drawing straight lines against what's there. And select, delete, zoom out. Probably can do these, and this is kind of reflection more so than transparency, so we'll leave that. I think that's it. Actually, those are going to have a little bit of darkness to them as well. I think they may be okay. Let's look at what the color. Yeah, they're not as blue. Alright, so we will now then darken everything besides the white. So if we take our burn tool, which is the hand, set it for mid-tones at 100%. I'm going to make the brush really big so I can do everything. We'll clean that up in a sec. Okay, and then we can delete. Sorry. Everything that's, oops. Swap my colors, delete black, black, zoom in, and so really, because there's some transparency, and reflection in these windows, I don't necessarily want to just go straight wide on the selection on these. I can fill them with, or even paint. Actually, yeah, let's do, so I don't want to be perfect on the selection. I want it to be sort of transparent, which means I want to do a little bit of black. So the brush, make it bigger, and do the opacity, which is right here, at like 10. Then I can just drag over and it makes it a little bit grayer. Do it again. So now when I do that selection and go to my layer up here, I can then fill that with a little bit of black. But notice that it's not pure black, it's kind of a dark gray. Now let me go ahead and paint. Just leave the exposure and change the size of my brush. I have to make a select all. So now if we just go back and do our dodge and burn technique. Again, we may not be deleting completely black. It looks like it's black here, but it may actually be like barely gray. But as long as it's close, we can fix it fairly easily. I'm just going to paint black here. And here. Let's see. Try to darken that. Let's fill out these stars. Okay. Up here. Can already see one spot where I think it looks black, but it's actually not, or not as black as it seems to be right there. Alright, so now we've got roughly, we need to do some white fill there. Here's our paintbrush. White selected. I'm using the paintbrush. Oh, my opacity's too light. Just trying to fix the tread. I think same thing here. Just have some noise. Let's look at, no, it's right, I just need to burn it. The brush smaller and, oops. Doesn't really matter if this is perfect because it's going to be so, I'm not even blurred in the foreground by the time it's done. Alright, so let's say that looks okay. Control that, select that, go back to our RGB, and we will inverse, select, inverse, delete. Let's do another delete just to make sure we get it black. Now, if we take that, control, select the whole thing, control A to select all, and then copy, control C, find our picture of the desert, and whoops. Paste it. So now we have this. We have to figure out how we want it to look. So maybe it's like we want some of the sun in there. Let's scale it bigger. Thought I was holding down Shift. It's not really holding its scale though. If you hold down Shift when you scale, it should constrain, but it's not. Do I have it locked? softer that way. Then we can take the whole thing, and then this layer that I just made, add probably some color from the sky here. Select it with the eyedropper, like that. I want to inverse the selection. Select inverse so I can get rid of that halo of dark on the layer below. Then probably for this layer I want to do a selection and a stroke with the same color. So you could do a stroke by saying layer, let's see, bear with me a sec, I'm trying to remember where it's at. Image adjustment. There it is, stroke under edit. I want to do 2 pixels. Let's try it on the center because this doesn't really matter. So you can see where I'm starting to kind of block out that darkness. Do it again. But we're going to do with 4, which will make it blur to the edge. We can do select the whole thing and do we'll leave it at that. This can be like not screen, maybe even we just leave it at just regular normal tone and slowly this is a balance between finding the right tone to kind of create the atmosphere. Not happy with this halo that's going on here in the mountains. Probably could do a better selection mask. We can figure that out. I think, though, need to play around with lighting is what's throwing this thing off. Why it won't blend as well because it's just too lit from the foreground. Ironically, this thing seems to do a little bit better, even though you have this going on. I'm going to leave that for now. We can always take it out again. So let's think about the crawler. here. We'll do a layers, or a levels, I mean, to figure out if it needs to. Probably something like that. Trying to make it match what's going on here in the foreground. It's like we're in the shadow of a mountain or something. So yeah, he needs to be darker for sure. We'll have to go back and check our color correction as well. I'm also thinking that it should be blurred. Yeah, that helps some. What we can do is we can do a selection mask. So if we do Control, duplicate this whole thing, make a layer mask from with revealing the selection. So now we have a mask that just is revealing this. If we make this blur, something like that, what we can do is create like a depth of field blur, where things that are closer to us will be more blurry and they'll get sharper as they recede. And all we have to do that is click on this mask. This mask. I'm going to just turn that layer on so you can see the mask and turn this off. So what I want to do is fill this with a gradient, where right now the whole thing's white. I want it to be black to white, but not like that. I want it to just be black filled over the white. So what I did is I went up here under the gradient selection. Instead of it being black to white, I chose black to transparent. So now when I fill this, like that, the mask continues to the edges, but now it's like it's blurry here and it's sharp here. Okay, it's not great, but it's a start. I think, let's go ahead and check our color correction. So you can see where this is off and this is a little off. Now with the colors as they've been adjusted, because we have so many layers, it becomes more difficult to, oh, actually we lost it here because this is blurry. And we moved our selective color to both of these. So I need to make this clip to that, create a clipping mask to that layer, and then create a clipping mask to that. So now it's clipping down to this layer. Let's double check that. Yeah, it's better. So anyway, in this tutorial, we've covered the idea of color matching using this layer luminosity, grayscale luminosity effect. The key to this is basically just making sure that you set this grayscale 50% gray layer to a luminosity overlay, and then you crank up the hue saturation with a layer effect on top of it so that it basically punches it so it's super bright. And then anything that's under that that doesn't match color-wise will stand out like a sore thumb, and then you just apply individual color selection layers to them, to each one of the objects, and adjust the colors, CMYK, or the white, dark, and shadows, to get them to match up, and then your color matching should be spot on. I talked about how this is wrong on his face, so one of the things you could do really easily to fix that is just go back and select your entire background. I just copied. I went down here to the background layer, select all, and copied it. And then above him, we'll go into our lens correction. This will be the entire image now. We'll do a custom geometric distortion, and what I want to do is I want to basically make it look like it's warped to a visor, like a round surface, which is what I'm doing. Normally this would take distortion out of a lens that had like a wide angle, like an anamorphic or lens or something like that, in which case you do it this way, where you could scale it in. But I'm using this to create kind of a fake round distortion on the image now. So I want to scale the whole thing down though, like that. Probably do even more. All right, let's just leave that. Then edit, transform, scale. I'm just going to move this and scale it to the visor. And hit enter. Now let's make it transparent and blend it to the actual visor itself. Luckily it's relatively straight. I'm going to just erase. Doesn't have to be a perfect alignment with the visor because we've got these little edges, and we're going to kind of fade it. Like there's a shadow there. There's also that finger there and here. Okay, so then let's fade it back up and see. Okay. What we'll do is we'll make it color dodge, linear dodge, one of these, just to figure out which. Get a little bit of both the original and that in the screen. thinking probably linear dodge so that we get the sky back. Take it down a little bit. Change the fill. So we get the darkness back. Yeah, it's better. So now it's like he matches a little bit more with the sky. Of course, we could also invert that. Although the way the sun's setting, maybe the sky is darker back here. So there's the original, there's that. Maybe it's not linear dodge, it's linear color. All right. So anyway, that's what do we use? We've used the magic eraser. We talked about channels in terms of creating these alpha channels, which are super useful, using the actual layers of the image to create those channels, which is even also just as useful. Making layer mask in our layer, color matching using, like I said before, the luminosity trick, and dodge and burn and smudging. Dodge and burn here for lightening and darkening things. Yeah, this, it's this mask. The biggest issue I have right now is this. The noise could probably help that too, but in terms of this mask, now, one way you can see the mask so that you can actually edit this and try to make it fit better. So if you're in the mask and then you turn on quick mask mode, it may not show up as much in or if you go into channel and you just select that mask and turn it on. Because we're working with a red image, it's harder to see, but you can see that you can kind of see where it got redder. That's the mask is represented by red. So you could basically smudge it up to try to fix this using a smudge tool. But the smudge is going to basically mask out this image that we've applied it to. So really what we need to do is take the image and smudge it down into the mask, because it looks like the mask is where it needs to be. So if we go back to layers, go to image, let's go back into channels and go back to RGB so that we don't show our mask. So in this actual image, just using the smudge tool, and make sure we don't have a selection. So I selected all, smudge down. And then the one above, although that's not even showing. So is it this one? Actually, yeah, let's turn that one off and that one off and smudge down so that we can see get everything blending into the rocks as much as we can. This one. It's almost as if the sky's been smudged up. That's it. So our blend selection, or our haze there, was what was causing the lightness. So I'm just pushing it up above the rocks so that we get a harder edge. And there are lots. I forgot that I was basically, when I did that hard outline, trying to broaden the mask to hide the dark edges, it was basically going down into the rocks as well. So that's what was creating that brighter line between the two. Zoom back. Yeah, it's much better. Okay, so then one thing we need again is the noise back. So if we go to our noise layer here, we're just going to duplicate it and grab it. Move it up. We will move it up above even the haze, I believe, and fill the mask for it with black. So Control All and Alt Delete. So that made our mask all black. Now if we select the outline, the original outline of our rocket ship, and come back and select our mask, change the color to foreground color to white, and then Alt Delete. Then we get noise back over the haze and the rocket ship. Now we can do the same thing, although we probably need a bigger noise with the the crawler here. So let me select that mask, go back, fill with black, Control Alt Delete. Whoops. Yeah, Control Alt Delete. Move our noise into the foreground over this, and I'm just going to grab, and I hold down Control and Alt and select. So I'm just going to repeat it. So now we have, if I select the layer, we've got a whole big wall of noise now, but it's all blacked out. So I just need to select the crawler, go back up to that noise layer, and select the mask, change our foreground color to white, Alt Delete, and we get noise back over everything. It's subtle. I mean, you probably can't even see it because of the video, but the gist is that if you were doing this high res, or if we zoom in, you see this noise that occurs because of the JPEG artifacting and stuff, that now it's kind of reintroduced back into the crawler. Like here. It's a different kind of noise, but I don't think they've written a filter. It's hard to tell the difference when you zoom out. And this is the same kind of noise that'll get introduced from like film processing and things like that. So if this was this one, I'm sure had it because it was originally a filmed camera and not a digital camera. You get the same effect. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial. I know it was a lot, but pretty much this for the class that we're teaching this semester, this will be almost everything that you need to know about Photoshop. We'll get into color theory and things like that later, but this is the majority of the kinds of tools that you're going to need to use. So if you have any questions, just post them in the comments.